I married Julian Hartman when I was 28. We lived in a luxury penthouse on the Upper East Side, New York City. He was one of the most successful corporate lawyers in the country, sharp, respected, wealthy, and extremely structured. From the beginning, it wasn't about love. It was practical. He told me straight up, "I need a wife who understands how to protect an image. I'm not the romantic type." And at that time, I just needed stability. My father had gone bankrupt, my mother was sick, I was tired of surviving. The first 6 months felt like living on a schedule. Meal times, people I could and couldn't meet, places I had to avoid. Sometimes even my outfits were chosen by his assistant. Julian wasn't physically abusive. He never yelled, never hit, but he monitored everything. He'd know if I changed my email password. He'd notice if I came home 12 minutes later than usual. Every Friday night, we had dinner at the same restaurant on Madison Avenue. He always faced the entrance. I sat with my back to it. Work habit, he once said. But it wasn't a habit. It was control. He was rarely home. He'd work until 2 a.m. or fly out on short notice to Chicago, London, or Houston. Eventually, I stopped asking where he went. 3 months into the marriage, he announced he was hiring me a personal bodyguard. "Not because you're special," he said, "but because I am, and you're part of my system." His name was Rafael Cruz, ex-military, now a private security contractor. Tall, quiet, expressionless, always 3 steps behind me, even when I was just grabbing a latte on 68th Street. At first, I hated having him around. He was too quiet, too present, but over time, I got used to him. Actually, I started to feel safe, because he was the only one who saw me. Not as Julian's property, not as a PR accessory, as a person. He remembered I liked chocolate muffins, that I never wore jackets even when it was freezing. He stepped a little closer when I looked anxious. Never inappropriate, but always aware. Every morning, he'd be waiting when I walked out, the car running, door open, no small talk, just dependable presence. Eventually, I started looking forward to seeing him more than I looked forward to anything else. One day, I fainted in a boutique in Soho. Exhaustion. I hadn't eaten, I was stressed. Julian had snapped at me the night before. Rafael carried me out and drove me straight to an urgent care clinic in Chelsea. He stayed the entire time. He bought me a sandwich. Julian never called. That day, I started talking. Bit by bit, I told Rafael about the marriage, about my mother's condition, about the way my life was managed like a spreadsheet. He didn't give advice. He just listened. And that was enough. Week by week, we grew closer. Nothing physical, just lingering glances, arms brushing as we walked, heavy silence in the car that started to feel electric. Then one night, while Julian was in Dallas, I dreamed about Rafael. And the next morning, I realized I wasn't afraid of my husband anymore, but I was starting to be afraid of myself. Looking back, I don't think I realized it was happening. It started slowly, too slowly for me to notice. Rafael had been working for us for about 6 weeks at that point. His job was to stay close and keep me safe, especially when Julian was away, which was most of the time. He didn't talk much, just "yes, ma'am," or "car's ready," that kind of thing. But he was always there, on time, professional, predictable. That predictability became comforting. I was used to being ignored. Julian had made that part normal. But Rafael held doors, walked slightly behind me, always scanned the room. It didn't feel like he was doing a job. It felt like he was looking out for me. I didn't tell anyone, obviously. Not my sister, not my friends. Well, if you could call them friends. Julian had slowly filtered my social circle down to people who either worked with him or worked for him. He said they were cleaner connections, less messy. Anyway, one day, I had to attend a networking event in Midtown. Julian couldn't make it. Board call from London, he said. So Rafael drove me there. After the event, it was raining, and I was tired, so instead of going straight home, I asked him to take me somewhere to get food. Nothing fancy, I just needed to sit somewhere that didn't feel like marble in silence. He pulled over at this 24-hour diner on 3rd Avenue. Not exactly my usual scene, but I didn't care. I told him he didn't have to come in. He said he'd wait in the car. I sat alone in a booth near the window, ordered pancakes at 10 p.m., and just let myself breathe. About 15 minutes in, I noticed him through the window, still sitting in the car, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the door. Something about that made me feel safer than I'd felt in a long time. I bought him coffee, nothing big, just black, no sugar. I figured that's what he drank. When I got back in the car, I handed it to him without saying much. He looked at it, then looked at me. Didn't smile, just nodded once. That was the first time I did something for him, not the other way around. A few days later, he walked me back into the apartment after a doctor's appointment. Julian had just landed from a trip, but didn't come out to greet us. No welcome home, nothing, just silence from the study. Raphael stayed near the door, waiting to be dismissed. I turned around to thank him for walking me up. It was automatic, polite. But for some reason, we just didn't move. I didn't say goodbye. He didn't nod and leave like he usually did. There was a pause. I think we both knew that something had shifted. I didn't touch him. He didn't touch me. But we were standing too close for it to be normal. Not inappropriate, just different. I stepped back first, said thanks. He left. It wasn't anything, but it was also not nothing. The next few days, I caught myself watching him more, noticing things I hadn't before. Like how he always kept his phone in his left pocket, how he double-checked every lock, even in safe neighborhoods, how he never looked bored, even when we sat in traffic for 40 minutes. I started feeling guilty. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I wanted something I wasn't supposed to want. Julian came home that Friday, no warning, no smile, just walked in and tossed his keys on the counter. He asked how the doctor meant. I told him everything was fine. He didn't ask anything else. That night, I lay awake in bed thinking about Raphael, not in a romantic way, just wondering if he noticed me the way I noticed him. Wondering what he would do if I ever made a move. Of course, I wasn't going to. I wasn't that kind of woman. At least, I thought I wasn't. I don't know what I expected to happen. I thought maybe it would go away, that whatever I was feeling was just in my head, a side effect of being lonely for too long. But it didn't go away. It got worse. I started finding excuses to talk to Raphael, asking him about his background, his last assignment, what cities he's worked in. He always answered politely, short, clean sentences, no details. That just made me want to ask more. One afternoon, we were stuck in traffic on the FDR for almost an hour. I had nowhere important to be, so I just let him drive aimlessly around the city. We ended up near the waterfront in Red Hook. He pulled over without asking. It was quiet, a few boats in the distance, some gulls circling overhead. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We just sat there for a while. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't flirty, it was just two people, not speaking, not leaving. After maybe 20 minutes, he asked if I wanted to get out and walk. I did, so we did. He walked a few steps behind as usual. I turned around once and asked if he ever gets bored doing this. He said, no. That was it. But for some reason, my heart kept pounding after he said it. That night, Julian texted me from his trip to Geneva. Just one sentence. Don't forget your lunch with Laura tomorrow. Laura was his cousin, the kind of person who asked invasive questions and called it family bonding. I ignored the text. The next day, instead of going to lunch, I told Raphael to drive me upstate. I made it sound like I needed fresh air, a change of view. He didn't ask questions. We ended up in Cold Spring at a small hiking trail. Nothing too intense, just enough to feel far from the city. We walked most of the trail in silence. At one point, I slipped on a patch of wet leaves. He caught me by the elbow. The touch was brief, but I didn't move away right away. He didn't either. There wasn't a kiss, no big moment, but that's when the shift happened. I realized I didn't just like Raphael's presence, I needed it. Not because he was kind, not because he was protective, but because he felt real in a life full of things that weren't. 2 days later, it finally happened. It was a Saturday. Julian was still abroad. I'd spent the whole day doing nothing, just walking circles around the apartment, checking the same messages, watching TV I didn't care about. I texted Raphael, "Can you come up for a minute? Something's wrong with the security panel." That was a lie. There was nothing wrong. He came in, stood by the door like always. I told him the screen near the front didn't work. He walked over, checked the system. It was fine. Then he turned around to tell me, and I kissed him. It was fast, unplanned, and completely stupid. I don't even know if I meant to. My body just moved. He stepped back, clearly surprised, didn't say a word. I apologized immediately, told him it was a mistake, that I was tired. He nodded once, then left. That night, I barely slept. I thought he wouldn't come back the next day, that maybe he'd report it to Julian or quit. But the next morning, he was downstairs, like usual, car ready, door open, same expression as always. We didn't talk about what happened, but something between us had changed permanently. From that moment on, I stopped lying to myself. I was in love with Raphael. And worse, I knew, deep down, I wasn't going to stop. The first sign was small. Julian came back from Geneva 2 days earlier than planned. No warning, no explanation. I found out when the front door opened at 8 a.m., and I heard his suitcase wheels click across the floor. He didn't call ahead, he didn't text. He just walked in like he hadn't been gone for almost 2 weeks. He kissed me on the cheek, poured himself a black coffee, and sat at the kitchen island scrolling through emails, like nothing had changed. But something had. He didn't ask about the apartment, or the meetings I'd skipped, or why I hadn't joined that charity brunch with his board member's wife. Instead, he started noticing things he used to ignore. He looked at my phone longer when it lit up. He commented on outfits I wore, not in a controlling way, just casually. "You haven't worn that dress in a while." It was the same dress I wore the day I kissed Raphael. I felt my stomach drop, but I didn't react. Later that week, he handed me a necklace box, out of nowhere, no birthday, no anniversary. It was a thin gold chain, beautiful, simple. I said thank you, asked what it was for. He smiled and said, "Just because." I wore it the next day. That night, I saw a tiny glint on the underside of the clasp, smaller than a pinhead. I didn't say anything, but I didn't sleep that night either. Then came the second sign. Raphael started keeping more distance than usual. He stood farther from the car, didn't meet my eyes as often. No more coffee runs, no more small detours. He still did his job, perfectly, but I could tell something had shifted. When I finally asked, he hesitated before answering. "Just being careful," he said. I didn't push, but I knew. Somehow, Julian had spoken to him. Not directly, maybe, but enough to warn him. Enough to make him think twice. A few days later, Julian invited me to one of his client dinners, the kind he usually hated me attending. Formal, awkward, full of men in expensive suits with empty wives beside them. We went to a steakhouse on West 52nd, private dining room, closed door, fancy wine. I was on edge the whole time. Julian kept his hand on my leg under the table, not in a sexual way, but possessive, like I was something he wanted to remind me he still owned. When we got home, he poured another drink and sat on the couch in his robe, flipping through the news on mute. Then he said it, without looking at me, without changing his tone. "Did you ever think about what would happen if I stopped pretending I didn't notice?" My body froze. I kept washing my face in the bathroom, pretending I hadn't heard him. "Because I notice a lot of things, Claire," he said. "Always have." I walked out, said I was going to bed. He didn't follow. That night, I took the necklace off and hid it in a drawer. After that, the pressure became constant. Small things. My phone would randomly log me out of apps. Calendar invites would show up from meetings I didn't schedule. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly messaged me on Instagram, old coworkers, ex-friends, asking how I was, telling me they'd seen me somewhere. One even sent a screenshot, a blurry image, me and Raphael, in the car, my hand resting on his arm. No caption, no context, just the picture. I blocked them, deleted it. But I couldn't delete what I felt. Julian wasn't trying to catch me. He already had. Now he was making sure I knew it. And worst of all, he wasn't yelling, accusing, threatening. He was calm, collected, controlled, which was exactly what made it terrifying, because it meant he was planning something. And when Julian planned something, he always followed through. At first, I thought maybe he'd just leave me. That would have been the cleanest option. Divorce, paperwork, damage control. He could spin it however he wanted. I cheated, I broke trust, I embarrassed him. But Julian didn't leave. Instead, he started getting closer. Suddenly, he had time. He came home earlier, ate dinner with me, asked about my day. He complimented my hair, bought groceries, played the part of a husband who still cared. It felt wrong, like someone had studied my husband and was now pretending to be him. One morning, I found my phone wiped. No apps, no messages, just a fresh start, like it had been reset. I took it to a repair shop in Soho while Raphael, my new bodyguard, waited outside. The guy behind the counter asked if I had backed up my data. I said no. He looked confused and said, "You sure this reset wasn't remote?" I didn't respond. I just thanked him and walked out. A few days later, I went to see a lawyer, quietly. No calls, no texts, no GPS. I left the phone at home. I'd met her once before, a friend of Laura's. I thought maybe, if I kept things vague, she'd give me advice without reporting back to anyone. But 2 hours after I got home, Julian was already there, waiting in the living room. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just closed his laptop and said, "Don't waste time on bad counsel. You already have the best." I nodded, said nothing. He smiled, poured me a glass of wine I didn't ask for. That night, the lawyer texted me. "Apologies, I can't help with your situation. Please don't contact me again." Then came the worst part. I tried to leave, not run, just leave. I packed a small bag, enough for a weekend. I told Julian I was visiting my mother. He nodded and said, "Of course, send her my love." I made it halfway to the train station before a man I didn't know tapped me on the shoulder and said my car was parked wrong. There was no car. But behind him, a black sedan pulled up, same driver Julian used for his court runs. The door opened without a word. I got in. I never made it to the station. Instead, the car took me straight back to the penthouse. Julian was in the kitchen when I arrived, still wearing his suit. He looked up, mildly amused. "You forgot your passport," he said. "Thought you might need it." I didn't reply, just walked to the bedroom, unpacked my bag. He didn't yell, he didn't hit, he didn't even raise his voice. But from that moment on, I knew I was under surveillance, not just physically, but psychologically, and he wanted me to know it. The Raphael chapter was over. He didn't contact me, not once. I found out later he had left the country. Julian offered that information casually, like commenting on weather. Cruz took an overseas contract, better pay, less drama. I didn't ask for more. By then, I'd stopped asking questions I didn't want real answers to. 6 months passed. I'm still here. I eat breakfast with Julian 3 times a week. I show up at charity events, smile at cameras, kiss cheeks. I don't flinch anymore when people bring up loyalty or strong marriages. I just sip my drink and nod. Julian's public image is better than ever. I play my part. My mother's treatments are covered, my father's business quietly recovered through a loan that came through at the last minute. Of course, Julian arranged it. I got everything I asked for, except my freedom. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I had been faster, smarter, colder. If I had gotten to Raphael first, if we'd planned it better, if we'd kept it quiet. But it's pointless now, because I thought I had a choice. Turns out, I never did. If this story left you speechless, you're not alone. Like, share, and subscribe for more true-feeling stories of love, betrayal, and psychological control. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who never raise their voice.